Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this session of the Aquatic Invasive Species webinar series. This month, we're excited to welcome Dr. Amy Kinsley to talk about updates to AIS Explorer, so that you can look at it for more tools for management and prevention strategies for aquatic invasive species. I have a couple of housekeeping items I'm going to go over quickly, and then I'm going to turn it over for Amy's presentation. So everyone during the webinar will be muted, but if you have questions, we're ready for you. We're going to be using a tool called Slido to take your questions and answers. And you can either go to slido.com and enter the event code Explorer to enter your questions at any point during the presentation. And you can also go there to upvote questions that you are really interested in hearing the answers to. If you do have problems with that, don't worry. We have Michelle Isaacson here, and she's ready to take your questions out of chat, and she'll drop them in to Slido so that I'll see them during moderation, and others can see your questions and upvote them as well. We do record our webinars, so you can watch for this recording to pop up onto our YouTube channel. It usually takes about a week or two before we're able to get the transcriptions done, but we'll send out a notice once that's available in case there's anything you want to review or there's something you want to share with friends or colleagues. And I think that's all that I have for housekeeping. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Amy Kinsley, and she can introduce herself and share what she has to share for the day. Thanks, Amy.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Megan, and thank you to AIS Detectors for the invitation to share my work today. I'll go ahead and get my screen share going. Yeah, so again, thank you for the invitation, and I want to thank you all for taking time out of your busy day to learn more about the new tools that we've launched through AIS Explorer. And I've been contributing to the tools I'm presenting here for the past 5 or so years. A little background on myself. I'm Amy Kinsley. I'm an assistant professor in the College of Veterinary Medicine. I'm also a research fellow with MACERC, and also an associate with the Institute on the Environment. My research focuses on aquatic epidemiology, so trying to understand how pathogen, pollutants, and invasive species spread in aquatic environments, and using the knowledge about those connections to develop efficient and effective control strategies. And so there's a lot of concepts to cover here, and I'm looking forward to hearing your questions and feedback. So I'm going to go ahead and dive right in. For those who are not familiar with AIS Explorer, it is a free interactive dashboard, and it was designed to support AIS managers with decision-making around prevention and management. And the aim was to make data-driven approaches more accessible. It's interactive, meaning that it can be tailored to your interest and can automatically update to account for changes in lake infestation status. So once a new lake has been designated by the DNR as infested, it changes the outputs within the tool, so you're constantly getting up-to-the-date information, or as up-to-the-date as possible, which means that it has the potential for my work to stay relevant longer and to serve more people, which is important to me. It's available at www.aisexplorer.org or through aisexplorer.umn.edu, but I'm going to urge you all not to go pulling it up right now. There's a lot to play with and dig into on the dashboard, and I want to make sure that I keep your attention. And if we all flood it at the same time, it might slow things down and kind of change your user experience. So I'm going to have you, again, urge you to hold off on that temptation to visit the site. I'll go through at the end of this and share some more resources with you. So when you do dig in, if you have some questions, you can always reach out or refer to those resources. The dashboard was made public about 4 years ago and has been an initiative involving partnerships and researchers from a variety of disciplines and institutions. So I'm the one here sharing this information with you today, and I've contributed quite a bit to this dashboard, but by no means was this a solo effort. Decision support tools like this can be used to increase planning rigor, accountability, stakeholder participation, transparency in decision-making, and also can be useful in learning about how actions influence outcomes. And throughout this process and the release of this tool, we've been able to hear some stories about how that has become true. And I really love hearing about how this tool has influenced folks, not only in the way that they think about the way AIS spread through our lakes, but also in ways that it's enhanced their learning. So if anybody wants to reach out ever and share some stories, I'm all ears. There are 4 tools that are housed within AIS Explorer. There's the Introduction Risk for Surveillance, an Intervention Impact tool, Prioritization for Watercraft Inspections, Collaboration and Paired Planning tool as well. And today my goal is to introduce you to the 2 new tools that are available. And so that is the Intervention Impact tool and the Prioritization for Watercraft Inspections sub-tab, the Collaborations and Paired Planning. But since the new tools are built off concepts that are incorporated in the existing tools, I'm going to take a brief tour of those as well. And so here I'm just highlighting those tabs. They'll be on the header of the app, so they should be somewhat apparent. I'm showing this collaborator paired planning in this way, just as a reminder that it is a sub-tool available once you click into the prioritization for watercraft inspections tab. And so if you're familiar with AIS Explorer already and you're a frequent user, you've probably noticed that these have popped up. Again, you can kind of click and check that out whenever you have time and scoot around. I realize that I don't need to emphasize the importance of surveillance to this audience, but I do want to highlight that the earlier we detect the presence of an invader, the easier it is to eradicate or contain the populations and minimize long-term management costs. And so here I'm just showing the invasion curve with time on the x-axis and area infested and control costs on the y-axis. And as you can see, the longer it takes to detect an invader, the more area becomes infested, and then the harder and more expensive it becomes to limit further spread. But given that there's numerous water bodies in Minnesota and that we have limited resources and logistical challenges in surveilling all of our lakes, using risk-based prioritization strategies or aiming for lakes that have the highest risk can be most effective and efficient. So to support risk-based approaches, we developed the Introduction Risk for Surveillance tool that models the spread of invasive species from lake to lake, and it provides a risk score to prioritize lakes for surveillance. So a recent synthesis of invasion theory suggests that invasion occurs when there's really 3 key elements. There's all of those elements that are influenced by human activities kind of come together, and those are biotic factors, abiotic factors, and propagular pressure. So when we think of biotic factors, those are living things in the ecosystem. Abiotic factors are those non-living things within the ecosystem. And then propagular pressure is that connectivity that could lead to an introduction. And here we consider those as major pathways for spread. For our introduction risk tab, we considered zebra mussels and starry stonewort, and therefore we considered boater movements and natural water connections. And we captured those abiotic and biotic factors through lake level environmental suitability scores that designated a lake as simply suitable or unsuitable. So we realized there's a simplification within there, but that was an assumption within our model. And to determine how AIS spread from lake to lake through these pathways, we constructed networks that are made of what we call nodes and edges. And so that represents lakes, which would be those nodes, and their connections, which we depict through these edges. And so here I'm showing a very simple form of a network, right? We just have 2 nodes or 2 lakes that are connected here by a form of connection or that one edge. But in reality, networks of human movements and lake connectivity through natural waters are far more complex than that. There's far more nodes, far more edges, and that gives rise to patterns in the network that we can use to describe that network and that connectivity, and also study it and explore a variety of what-if scenarios by manipulating the network based on those measures. So here I'm showing a network with some measures that were taken that describe some of the characteristics that we might be interested in a network. It can refer to either the network as a whole, so that might be things like these global metrics that I'm showing here, or it can refer to a specific node within the network. And so I'm showing a variety of those too, like degree centrality, which is the number of connections that that lake has. A lot of times you'll hear that referred to as just a degree, or maybe even betweenness centrality, which tells you about how important that node is within the connection of other nodes within that network. But for the majority of the talk, I'll refer to the concepts behind the tools that are informing the networks that we use in AIS Explorer using a toy network. So here I'm showing a toy network that we can imagine represents lakes connected by boat movements. And let's say these were recorded by the DNR watercraft inspection data. So here we can see that each lake is connected to one other lake, but there are some lakes that are connected to multiple. And so overall, it's pretty sparse in general. And again, I'm just going to use and refer back to this toy network to highlight some of the models, assumptions, and some of the concepts we use related to this. But in reality, we used a boater network that was constructed using the DVM watercraft inspection data that generated a much larger network, as I mentioned. That network estimates the movement of boats between 9,182 lakes that used over 1,600,000 survey responses, so quite a bit. You can see here in the image on the right how dense that network is, and we have those green dots to highlight those lakes that have higher scores of interest, like centrality or betweenness, that we had talked about in our previous image or our previous slide. And so this network went above and beyond what was reported in the surveys to predict the boat movements between lakes, even those that were not observed within the inspections. And so in this figure, I'm showing with the dashed lines, those lines that represent the predicted movements, giving us a more complete picture of that connectivity. So we designated the lakes as infested or uninfested, as I mentioned before, from the DNR infested waters list. And I sometimes refer to those movements that go from infested lakes to uninfested lakes as risky boat movements. And so I'm using that definition there. Within the dashboard, we might represent higher numbers of boats moving between lakes using thicker lines. So if you go around and click on the lakes and you see that the line is thicker in some instances than others, that's what that's representing there. You can dig in a bit further and get more information on that as you peruse around, and I'll highlight some of that as we move forward. And we can use that complete picture about connectivity within the model that we developed to model the spread of an invasion from an uninfested lake to an infested lake, incorporating some variability that accounts for uncertainty. And some of that is uncertainty in what we know and what we don't know, and some of that's also just biological variability as well. So here in this network, I'm showing that one of these lakes is infested. I'm designating it that with this yellow triangle and the red color, but we can imagine that we've modeled that spread to an uninfested lake. And if we repeat this numerous times using the information that we've captured from currently infested lake patterns that we've collected, we can generate risk scores that reflect the likelihood that a lake becomes infested in the future. And so that's what I'm showing here. The risk scores that you see on the dashboard range from 0.1 to 1. So those that are lower mean that there's less risk, and those that are higher mean that there's more. And so that means that's the more likely they are to become infested, and we run that out for 5 years. When you click on the dashboard, when you pull up the dashboard, you see that start sign. When you click that start button, or the start button, and you click on that start button, it pulls up this page. This is automatically the default introduction risk for surveillance tab, and that shows that results of that risk model that I just walked through. That's that estimate of the likelihood that a water body will be invaded. And you can then choose on the menu on the left which species you're interested in, either zebra mussels or starry stonewort. And you can get an overall risk score. You can filter it by boat movement or water connectivity, and you can select either a county of interest, multiple counties of interest, the entire state. You can look at tribal territories or tribes or ceded territories as well. You can go in and remove some of the layers that are the default here. Here we're showing the risk score, the current infestation status, the top 10 connections, and location boundaries, but you can turn those on or off and update the network to get updated visuals on those. And you can see that the risk scores correspond to those different lakes. Here I'm showing some lakes that within the app that are showing kind of a distribution of risk scores. And you can see, though, that I've selected multiple counties for visualization here on the left. So that would be kind of where you would type in or filter the list of counties to get an output that you were interested in. You can also export your outputs as a table, or you can have the map image as well, and you can keep those for later. So you can archive some of the analyses or output investigations that you've done on your own. And that way, if any infestation scores change, or you want to go back and just analyze what you've done in the past, you can keep those within your records. If you click on a lake, you can get more information about the risk output scores. Here we're showing those scores broken down by that boater connectivity or the boater movement or water connectivity. As I said, you can filter that out on the panel on the left, or you can just click on a lake and get more information. You can also get more information about the boater networks. So here we're showing the incoming nodes and the outgoing nodes, and you can click on either and get an updated graphic of where those boats are actually coming from. Here, this has been filtered for the top 10 connections because I mentioned this network that we generated is quite dense. So sometimes it can be hard to make sense of if we have a ton of connections. Sometimes we just want to isolate it to these top 10 to get an idea of where those strongest number of boats coming from too, right? And remember, those that have the thicker line mean that there's more traffic moving between them. Those yellow symbols are going to designate lakes that are already infested as well. So you can get an idea of incoming. Or you can trade this out and get an idea of outgoing traffic as well from the lake, depending upon the question that you're interested in. But the new tool that I want to dig into today that was kind of built off these concepts is the intervention impact tool. And so I think of this tool as a way in which we allow you to kind of borrow the model and run and compare different scenarios where you want to compare the impact. So what happens if I place interventions at these locations, and also do a comparison of the cost as well. So for example, imagine that you have 100 boats that are traveling from an infested to an uninfested lake. And if we placed an inspector at this lake, we could reduce the risk of an introduction. And since we can't inspect all the boats, and we also know that our interventions aren't 100% effective, we know that some risk still remains, right? So we still have some portion of that line existing between those two lakes. But if we imagine we place an inspector also at the incoming lake or another prevention measure at the incoming lake, we could reduce that risk even further. And since both interventions have an associated price, the tool provides you the capability to assess how much it would cost, or go in and tweak the amount that you know in your mind it would cost to place the interventions at the different lakes, and then estimate the number of infestations that would be prevented, or the change in risk that would be a result of this strategy, or a variety of other strategies that you're interested in. So if we go back to this toy network, we have an infested lake, and that leads to a new infestation, right? But if we apply interventions, maybe we could reduce the risk or even prevent spread at additional lakes. And that's what going through this modeling process can give us an idea of. So when we go into the dashboard and you click on the intervention impact tab, this is what will pop up. There will be some instructions to walk through. And what this is doing is giving you kind of a list of what to be prepared to have at hand to run the simulation around this. So you can do this just poking around out of curiosity, but if you want to come back and save some of your outputs, or you wanted to do some sort of side-by-side comparison, it can be helpful to have all of this information ready and thought through whenever you start. The app does time out. So if at some point you decide you were going to go up and gather the information and it takes you a bit of time, you might come back to find that you have to start the iteration over. Though it isn't quite fast, just be aware of that. There is the option to log in. So because the model takes quite a bit of time to run, you can log in and save your information. So this saves the list of past model results and scenarios that you have run. And that can be for that, again, side-by-side comparison that you might be interested in. Or it is also useful to reuse past model settings. So let's say you went in and placed intervention at a variety of different lakes and estimated your costs for those, and you spend a lot of time and energy on that. When you go back in, that will be safe and ready for you to click on that scenario and edit, so you don't have to start back over. And that way you can create maybe multiple scenarios where you're intervening at similar lakes, but you have different estimates on cost or different estimates on effort or effectiveness. And I'll get into that a bit more. So just for convenience, if you don't see yourself doing that, you just want to be nosy, you don't want to go through the process of creating an account, you can always go through as a guest as well. Within the intervention impact tab, so I won't show you all of it because it can get quite lengthy on a page and be challenging to show within the slides. It will walk you through all of the steps of the process. And so I mentioned a bit of those already. You get to choose whatever lakes within a county or across counties. So you can select lakes that are located in multiple counties if you want to explore what it would be like to have some sort of a collaboration or just an understanding of a what-if scenario. You can define the effort at that lake as well. So let's go ahead and see what that might look like. There are some default intervention efforts. And so if we're looking at these 3 interventions right now, watercraft inspections, hot water decontamination, and education and outreach, you can see that our default values are 15%, 0.1%, and 50%. And what that means is if you select a whole list of lakes, you have the ability to apply that to all of the lakes as a starting point, and then go in and tweak those yourself. If you know that you will place inspectors at a specific location, but you understand that the effort or the number of boats that you can invest in inspecting is higher than 15%, then you can go in and tweak that as well. And so this is kind of a different way of thinking about things as a percentage of effort. We have some text in here to help frame your thinking around that, but we're asking you to think about effort as a percentage of the total number of boats that we have estimated that move in and out of that lake. How many can you actually apply those interventions at in your scenario that you're estimating? So the idea here is to provide you with a tool that is customizable for the question that you're interested in. You will see a scenario list if you generated a profile that will save a variety of runs for you. While it is running, you'll get this processing results output, and that'll kind of circle around until the outputs are ready. If you just close the dashboard, you will receive an email with updates, and that will give you an overview of your total yearly cost of the interventions based on the selections that you put within the dashboard, and will give you a variety of outputs where you can compare the impact. So here we're showing the percent change in risk across lakes that you applied interventions at, and we can see that quite a few had 50 to 60% change in risk. But if you go into the tool and you poke around, you'll see that there's a variety of other ways that this has been communicated. You'll see maps as well, and it's for starry stonewort and for zebra mussels as well. I labeled this fun run and generated it earlier this morning, and it took about maybe 10-15 minutes for me to get these results back. You can see that I placed some intervention at 47 lakes across 5 different counties, and it gives me a summary of those results as well. For the prioritization for watercraft inspections tab, this is one of those existing tabs that we had within the app. We wanted to provide support on the optimal location to place inspectors based on our knowledge of boat movements. And so this work started with one-on-one consultations with county managers. And so there was a specific request and a specific need for us to provide a list a list of ranked lakes in order and an estimate of the percentage of risky boats that were inspected. So in this example, it might be easy to identify that this yellow lake is a top priority lake because it has high numbers of connections. And so ranking it as number 1, let's say, allows you to inspect 5% of the total risky boats in your county. Well, if we assume that inspecting it means we're able to inspect all the risky boats entering and exiting it, then we can kind of remove that from our candidate network list, as well as its connections. And we can see then maybe that the second lake that we would want to inspect is this yellow lake. And so we'll call that Lake B. Right? And let's say that that results in 25% of risky boat inspections, but that's if we inspect A and B, right? Because we made some assumptions that we were removing Lake A and its connections from the network. And if we carry on with that, right, so on with Lake C here, we see that we've reached a whopping 45% of the risky boats. And we were inspecting 45% of those with only inspections at 3 lakes or inspectors at 3 lakes, right? This is just an example of how the algorithm works. But again, those real networks are much more complex than this. But that algorithm that we've generated can shed a lot of light on the decisions, especially when those differences in perceived boat traffic movement or the boat traffic between lakes can get quite close. And so what you see though in the dashboard looks like this. You see a list of those ranked lakes. And here I'm showing an example of Hennepin County. Here we're looking at zebra mussels and starry stonewort, but we've also added Eurasian water milfoil and spiny water flea to this output as well. And here we're saying that if we wanted to inspect 100% of the risky boats in Hennepin County, that we would need to place inspectors at 126 lakes. And there's the list of lakes that we see here. And you can scroll down and get an idea of what all 126 lakes are. And then each lake will have its ranking, its name, the DOW number, what its current infestation status is based on the current status, which will also be time-stamped in the corner, top right corner. And then the percentage of risky boats. And so again, this is cumulative. So if we inspect Lake Minnetonka, we're inspecting 18.6% in theory of the risky boats. And if we then inspect Lake Independence, we can reach 24.5%, so almost 25%. The outputs show on the map, show those lakes for inspection. Here, since we selected all, we have quite a bit, but if you selected fewer, this would be filtered for that. And there's also an option to see a chart, which calculates out the number of rescue boats based on the number of inspections. And so just to be transparent here, this is at the lake level. These analyses are at the lake level and not access point. We don't have the granularity in our data and our algorithms yet to do that, but folks have found this helpful nonetheless. Like the risk tab, you also have the ability to export this as a map or as a CSV and kind of store this away. So you can set up multiple scenarios and use this as a communication tool as well. We expanded on this based on some of our conversations that we had with folks, realizing that inspection programming is largely done at this county level, but boats don't really respect those county boundaries, right? And so what we did here was add this collaborations and paired planning tool that came out also from a variety of conversations we've had with other folks who do work on invasive species that just led to kind of curiosity around some scientific questions about differences in scale and structure. So we set up a variety of analyses there. And just to give you like a little baseline of where our thinking was around some of this, again, boats don't, respect county lines. Boaters are going to lakes for different reasons. Some of that might be proximity. Some of it might be proximity to the last lake. It might be proximity to home. Might be better fish, better recreational space. Might be near a cabin. Whatever the purpose that or reasoning is for them to go from one lake to another. Very rarely are they feeling restricted by those county lines, right? And we see that within our network. So realizing that networks have their very own structure, here I'm highlighting a cluster of nodes that are more connected than others within the network. Right, but when we think about county boundaries, those are just based on spatial orientation. But we see that maybe there's some clusters, and this isn't an example network, but just to highlight the point, there might be some clusters of lakes that are more tightly connected, meaning more boaters travel between those lakes than other lakes that are crossing those county boundaries. And if we had an understanding of what those connections looked like, maybe we could provide suggestions on counties and how they could collaborate to be more effective or efficient in their programming. So here I'm highlighting maybe like a group of counties that could work together based on that connectivity in a very simplified form. Here is data from the boat connections, and I've filtered it for the top 50 lakes. So these lakes are more highly connected than others. And based on our algorithm, we identified that these counties, Carver, Hennepin, Crow Wing, Cass, and Beltrami, were one cluster or one network of counties that had lakes that were more highly connected. And if they collaborated on placement of inspections, or in our analysis, they pooled all of their resources, we saw that there was actually the ability to inspect up to 10% more risky boats than not collaborating. And while that's unlikely to fully play out, we wanted to provide a tool that would allow the counties to connect with one another and explore some of these ideas and come up with ways where maybe we could foster some collaborations, whether it actually becomes about watercraft inspection planning or about educational initiatives or something else, but that fostered those connections around the idea of boater movements and our understanding of boater movement structure. So again, in the app, it's located here. If you select a county that is involved in a network, it will show up. You'll have the opportunity to click on the collaborations and explore further. If it's a county that's not part of a collaboration or didn't come up with in our algorithm as one of those highly connected counties, there's still an opportunity to explore some what-if scenarios of working together. If I placed inspectors here, how might it impact your planning based on this paired planning tool that is available to all counties. If you click on that collaboration tab, you'll not only see the output that I showed earlier, showing that network of counties and how those top 50 lakes are connected, but you also see a list of lakes that are ranked based on that group of counties. And so this is assuming that all of our county boundaries have been removed, and these are the only lakes that are considered for a priority. So similar to the watercraft inspection prioritization tab, where it goes county by county, but again, breaking down those county boundaries. So here we can see within that collaboration, the #1 county for inspection would be Minnetonka, followed by Leech, followed by Mille Lacs. And you can see we're bouncing around counties between those top 3 rankings. And within the paired planning tool, because this is computationally complex, we really only have the ability to manipulate one county and see its impact on another in a pairwise fashion at this point. What you can do is select the first county and then a paired county, and go in and select lakes where you want to place inspectors and see how it changes the ranking of the paired county. Meaning, if I place an inspector here and I'm removing that node and all of its connections from that network, we're assuming I'm 100% effective at inspecting risky lakes or risky boats on that lake. How could that change the way you might prioritize your lakes and vice versa? So you can flip those so that each county has a chance to be first county and each county has a chance to be the paired county, and get an understanding of how those two counties and their boater patterns actually impact each other. And so building maybe some intuition around that as well. So here I set up an example where I have just the default Hennepin County. I'm doing no interventions. And I went through and selected some interventions at lakes based on my priority list as Hennepin County. And I saw that it actually shifted downward some of the lakes and some of the rankings for Crow Wing County. So some of these might have been minor shifts between these two pairs of counties, but it was just one of the outputs or analyses that could be done with a tool like this. And in the future, what we're hoping to do is expand some of our work. So one thing we're doing is expanding on the networks. So right now we're using the watercraft inspection data. We have an interest in expanding our estimates of boater movements across the upper Mississippi River Basin, because just as boaters don't respect county boundaries explicitly because there's no real motivation to or need to, same with state lines as well. And so if we could expand our estimate of boater movement pattern, we can get a better understanding of what patterns of invasions might be at a larger scale. So we've are working with Fishbrain, which is an app that anglers use to track their catches. And also, if we pull the data from this app, can get information about their locations. We're doing a comparison right now between that data and what we've done for the Minnesota watercraft infection data, and have seen that those closely align, at least in the ability to identify highly connected lakes. We're also updating the networks with watercraft inspection data. The ones that I have showed before and that are running in the app are from 2014 to 2017, but we have data from 2018 to 2023. And so we are running the same algorithms that we ran before to give us a better idea of not only what do those networks look like now, but a deeper understanding of what happens in between those years as well. So we want to pull that open and take a look. And so here I'm showing, we'll look at that over those. We have 5 years of data now. We'll look at a cluster of 4 to make it comparable to what we had before. We'll take a deeper dive into what might maybe happen seasonally or even monthly in terms of connections and what kind of variability we have over years. We also want to look at networks based on boater type to see if there's patterns that we can pick up within there. And you can imagine that might lead to some interesting evolution of prevention measures and location and boater types of boaters as well, right? And so opening that up a bit more based on that knowledge from that empirical data. So as I mentioned, I worked with a variety of other folks to develop these tools and be able to be here and present this to you today. I want to thank some of my collaborators on this work. I had to split this into multiple slides because there's been so many folks who have contributed, not only folks who contributed to the science, but folks who contributed to the meaning of this work as well. So the county managers who gave us feedback on some of the questions they were asking, how the tool could be helpful, and even more importantly, how it could be improved. We heard from folks from lake associations as well, and folks from the DNR. I also want to thank Epi Interactive, who helped us with the data visualization. The first iterations of this were me making some R-Shiny apps that were usable, but much less user-friendly. I want to thank Macer for their help and support, Nicole Angel, who is a graduate student who helped us with the Intervention Impact app. And again, I want to thank you all for your attention today. If you're interested in hearing more, because I just gave us kind of a conceptual overview and a very brief window into what the app can do. I want to refer you to Macer's YouTube channel. I pulled out some of the talks that I know talked about bits of the tools even more. And I've placed those here. There's also a variety of papers that get into more details of the methods. So if you're really interested in geeking out on methods, I would love to, have conversations about that if that's something that you're interested in. The great thing about this work is that all of these papers are published open access, meaning that they're free. So anybody from the public can pull them up and take a look at them. And again, happy to chat further about it. And I'd love to answer your questions now.
Thank you so much, Amy. It's been so great to see the updates to this program and how it's changed over the years too. I'm going to take over screen sharing real quick so that I can reshare this code for everyone. Go. Okay, so here's how you can participate in our Q&A session. If you have a phone or tablet, you can just scan that QR code and it'll take you right to it. Otherwise, you can go to slido.com and enter the code Explorer, and it'll take you to this event, and it'll give you an opportunity to ask your questions and browse the questions that have already been asked. And then you can also upvote questions. So if there's ones that you really want to see answered, go ahead and upvote them, and that'll move them up towards the top of the list. We oftentimes, when we have this webinar series, will run out of time. So make sure to upvote the ones that you're really interested in. I'm going to go ahead and start. I'll leave the screen up for a little bit, and then I'll stop my screen share so that you can see Amy and I in full screen, I guess, instead. But to begin with, the first question that I see, Amy, that's made its way to the top says, are there any plans to add more species to the introduction risk tab, for example, spiny water flea or Eurasian water milfoil?
Yeah, so we have discussed that, and that is something that's on our list. We don't have current funding for it, so it isn't under development, but I want to kind of lay out a bit of the undertaking of this and why I say, we don't have funding for it and why that matters. So I kind of gave us like a brief overview of some of the concepts around this. And I think the framework for how we put this together and building that out was like a huge push towards progress on that front. But when we get into adding new species, there are a couple things that we have to consider. So one is that we use the historical pattern of invasions to give us an understanding of what spread rates might look like, right? And so that might be a little bit more challenging for spiny water flea I know that we have some data on Eurasian water milfoil we can use, but at the same time, we then need information to construct habitat, not habitat. I like to say habitat suitability, but that's all right. It's environmental suitability for these species as well. And so those two things can be limiting factors here. I would say that that takes more time than maybe it sounds like. But once we have that information, we can reparameterize the model and fit those then species in. We have the framework within the app to be able to do that as well. I think just the push would be kind of getting those parameters set. So when I say a parameter for spread, it's not just one value. We usually build distributions around that because there's a lot of unknown. And even for zebra mussels, where we know that we have quite a bit of data in terms of spread, there's still just a lot of unknown there. So kind of our limiting factor in some of this. But yeah, it's an interest of ours for sure.
Thanks, Amy. Just because
Yeah.
it's at the top of my head, I'm maybe going to ask a quick follow-up on that. But how different are the ones that you have now, like spiny water, sorry, starry stonewort and zebra mussels? How much do the networks change when you switch from one to the other, or the risk maybe?
Okay, so there's a couple things that I think are being asked within that. So if we are saying within the prioritization for watercraft inspections tab, and we go within that definition, we're looking at risky boat movements. We just take that whole boater connection network and we filter it for boats that are moving between lakes we know are infested with one species versus another. And we can see quite a bit of change because I built some collaboration networks around different species and they looked completely different. What I'm showing here is all species combined. So that's one thing. The other thing is though, within the risk model, we allow these species to spread through the entire boat network. We don't restrict it, right? The seeds for infestation come from those currently infested lakes, but they're allowed to propagate through multiple routes, right? Either natural water body connections or boats, both parameterized by what we understand currently about spread. Again, I think there's still a large amount of uncertainty within that. Um, so I'm trying to imagine what it would be like for spiny and Eurasian, and I'm not sure I can quite get there conceptually right now, like how that would fit into what we currently see. But
Yeah.
I think we would want to take a species-specific approach. Some folks suggest looking at invasion of similar species or in similar locations, but I think that's just something we haven't had the time or ability to undertake yet.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, next question, working its way to the top, is wondering how often AIS Explorer is updated.
Ooh, that's a great question. So the app checks twice a day. So it goes in, links to the DNR infested waters list and checks, are there any updates? If there is an update, it reruns the model and produces outputs. Running of that model can take a bit of time. So you might see up to a week in lag time from the time that that data has been accessed and the model has been run and the outputs are available, but it's checked quite often. So every couple of days. So again, the timestamp that you see on the app right now should be, whatever lag time likely due to the last infestation recorded.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. So do these tools only incorporate data from lakes that have inspection data? And how are lakes that don't have inspection data considered within the models?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's something I just briefly touched upon, but I'll kind of open that up a little bit more for you here. So we took the watercraft inspection data, and I consider that my empirical network, right? So that includes not only are there lakes where inspectors are, but they also, deploy a survey where they ask boaters, where was your last location and where are you expecting to go next? And with those two results, we're able to connect maybe up to 3 different lakes, right? Depending upon what that boater's response is. And we use that then into machine learning algorithms that take characteristics of lakes. So things like lake size, location from other lakes, location to highway, and uses that information to predict where boats might be going or predict where boats are going, if we're using the term prediction, where boats are going based on that inspection and survey data. And so we're able to construct that network. That's not just the empirical network, but those movements that have gone unobserved, driven by those characteristics. So we've done some statistical processing on that. What is the sensitivity and specificity of those models? Machine learning algorithms have been kind of infused in a wide range of parts of our life that, how does your Amazon driver know what route to take, right? Things like that. But we use models kind of similar to that. And we've had really high levels of specificity and sensitivity, meaning we take testing data and training data, and it's saying we're hitting the mark pretty consistently with what we do know about movement with those predicted movements.
Okay, next question. So it says, this is an excellent tool to model different interventions. Can it also demonstrate effects of actual past and present efforts, or in other words, show the current baseline of education, boat inspections, etc.?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's not designed to measure what has been done. And actually, that's a really important point to note, is that the parameters that we have for spread is the status quo, right? So when I take historical data and I say, here are the patterns of zebra mussel spread across the lakes in Minnesota, that I'm capturing for spread, that is assuming, because there's no way to tease apart what could have been versus what is. So we're assuming these interventions are being placed on the status quo. So what happens when you get the output and it says that change in risk, it's the status quo versus what it is that you have implemented within your intervention strategy in the tool. So that's a great point. But the short answer is no, we don't have that ability to go back. I've heard some conversations or theory around what anticipated invasion curves should look like and where we are. And maybe that gives us an idea of what our current prevention strategies are doing for us. But that's not something I've dug into, so I can't really speak anymore about that.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So for prioritizing inspections, is the percentage assuming 8-hour shifts, daylight coverage, or based on past data, so whatever hours they've used in the past at that location?
Yeah, so we've normalized everything within here, and the prioritization tab is very simple, but also has been we've received feedback that nonetheless very helpful. So we're assuming that we are doing 100% inspections on all of the boats and that we are 100% effective, right? So that means that if we place an inspector at Lake Minnetonka, which I showed as the highest ranking lake in Hennepin County, that we're inspecting all of the incoming and outcoming risky boats from that lake, right? And so that is less of a what if scenario given like a bit more realism and more of a here's the tool of ranking, giving us an idea of just boater traffic, right? So one thing that I think could be an interesting exploration is to take those prioritization outputs and place them into the intervention impact tab if you want to play around with those questions a bit more. In the future, we'd like to explore more granularity. It can be hard though, when we're doing our analysis at the lake level, there's different access points as well, to know like, oh, are we adding too much granularity in one aspect and not another, So yeah, that's where we are right now though.
Yeah. Wow, it's a lot to think about all in one spot, like all the different accesses at a potential
Yeah,
lake and which pieces to add in and which way.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, well, and the more granularity you add, the more uncertainty there is, so there's trade-offs between all these things when it comes to modeling. But I love these types of questions because it keeps us excited and kind of moving forward with where we, could see the tool going. So, yeah.
Great. Okay, so you had mentioned placing inspection and assuming 100% effectiveness, but we know that's not reality. Have you clearly listed the mean and range of the results? For example, even with hot water decontamination, that might not have 100% effect.
Okay. So I think we're crossing over two different tools. So for the prioritization for watercraft inspections, where it just ranks the lakes. That one is assuming 100%. Now, can you read the question again? Because I think this question is actually targeting the intervention tool. So I just want to clarify that point first. Can you reread it?
Yeah, so it says, you mentioned placing inspection and assuming 100% effectiveness. We know that's not reality. Have you clearly listed the mean and range of results? For example, even with hot water decontamination, we know it's not 100% effective.
Okay, yes, yes. Okay, so in response to that, so if you go into the intervention tab and you have the ability to kind of modify those default values that I showed, those default values in there come from research. So there was field work that was done by a graduate student named Nicole Angel, and she worked with Nick Phelps, and we're working to get out a couple papers around her research. But within there, there's much more information about the effectiveness of inspections, whether that's inspectors, boaters, or hot water decontamination. And so within the app, the idea is it will link you to some of that research when that paper is available, that will come up as well. But even within that, we don't include within their variability, but you can dig into that work a bit more or bring the knowledge that you have about the effectiveness and play around with that as well. Oh, great. Megan's linking some of those resources. Perfect.
Yes. Yeah, I mentioned so earlier this year we were able to host Nicole for the same webinar series. So I just dropped in the link if you'd like to go in and see what Nicole learned about like the effectiveness and the costs assigned to it that became the base of what Amy's talking about now. That's the link to that is currently in chat, and you can find that on our YouTube channel.
Yeah, much more information in there. So if you're interested in those types of questions, you will find a lot to explore. Yeah.
Great. All right. Next question. It said the last time that I had looked at the website, it looked like Upper Red Lake was shown as not infested for Nidalopsis or starry stonewort. And they're wondering if they're looking at this incorrectly.
I'm not sure. If it's showing up on the DNR infested waters list, it should be informed within the app. Sometimes we do find glitches within the dashboard. So that's something I'll make a note of. I'm not sure we've had that one reported before, but we also in the past, when we first launched AIS Explorer, we said, tell us about the errors that you're seeing. Tell us about lakes that aren't showing up that you want to show up. So if there's anything like that that comes up, please reach out to the folks at Macer, or you can reach out to myself as well. I actually don't know. I haven't checked on that red lake, but I will. It could be an error.
Great. So they can either email you or send like a generic email to the Macerc generic email address to get that addressed or to answer questions along those.
Yep, and there's a contact button within AIS Explorer, and you can report it there too. I think the fastest route would be probably to reach out to somebody at Macerc, like Maddie Hayden, or you can email myself, and we'll give you a more prompt response.
Great. Oh, I see. Well, and there was just a comment that popped up that's about this, and I'm going to pull that back up.
Sure.
Let's see. I asked about the Upper Red Lake issue a couple of years ago and said that it'd get fixed. So maybe it's not fixed yet, or maybe there's something else going on. So I don't know if we could maybe this person could reach out to you directly and explain
Yeah.
what they're seeing.
Yeah, I think having like a walkthrough of what it is that you're seeing and what it is that you're really interested in answering, and they can go through that with you.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So, is there a possibility that other interventions might be added into the future? For example, like a quarantine of infested lakes or something like that?
Yeah, folks have asked questions like that, and I think it's really fascinating. So one thing that I would suggest if you're interested in kind of playing around with ideas like that, you could go in, right? We labeled it as inspectors, decontamination, education, but those are just labels that, we've created so that we could put some default values in, but you can go in and change that to whatever you want, right? And then interpret your outputs in light of that. So if you wanted to do a quarantine, you could go in and see what that would look like if, you wanted to put I imagine you would do 100% effort and 100% effectiveness on whatever strategy it is that you're implementing at that lake, right? And that can give you an understanding about what happens in terms of risk to that lake, and then also tells you kind of downstream effects of that. There's been questions about things like, yeah, like infrastructure as well. I think we're always interested in exploring those ideas. But I think we need to gather more information about what it is that folks want to do, and if they need a separate panel where they explore 4 different interventions, or they can just manipulate what currently is. If you're interested in getting into that any further and walking through an interpretation of a whole scenario, we are doing one-on-one consultations. So if you reach out to me, myself, Maddie, Alex Badges, or Nick Phelps, are happy to sit down with you and walk through something like that.
That's great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. Next question is where if you could list what the underlying assumptions are that underlie the effects of intervention and what the limitations or deviations might be on those.
Okay, the assumptions of the interventions. And the deviations of those, like in reality, maybe. Okay. So I think there's, this is a challenging question to answer because I think there's a variety of models that are layered into what we're doing here, and they all have their own kind of set of assumptions, mostly simplifying what it is that we're asking so we can use this tool in a specific way, right? So one of the assumptions that we're using around interventions is related to the boat traffic, right? So we're assuming that we're intervening on one lake, not at an access. We're assuming that boat traffic is static across the years. What we've calculated from 2014 to 2017 is representative of what it is now. We are making assumptions about the number of boats, but all of these assumptions, right, that we are making, we're hoping we can get around when we allow you to borrow the tool, where you take that information and those assumptions and you bring in your knowledge as well. And so another thing we're doing are workshops so we can work through, and we're doing these one-on-one consultations so we can work through navigating our thinking around some of that. We're, making assumptions that once we place an intervention at a lake, when the risk score is generated 5 years out, that we haven't deviated from that plan, right? So we might change our strategy year to year, and we're not accounting for that within the model. So there's a variety of things like that kind of we need to peel back and get into a bit further. Right? If you say you're assuming that your intervention is a certain percent effective, that's not changing year to year. We're not assuming you're getting better with that. We're not assuming that's changing from inspector to inspector. So there's a whole host of assumptions that we're making within there. And I think this is a great time to also mention that these tools, yeah, they're not this is the plan. Some folks say, I want that intervention tool with the optimization to know what to do. Like, oh, that's really challenging because it's a coupling of the two. It's a framework and way of thinking. It's a variety of assumptions that we're transparent about. And it's the knowledge that you bring to the table about deviations from those assumptions and the data that you have and the strategy that you want. So, yeah. Hopefully that answered some of that.
Yeah. Thanks, Amy.
Yeah.
And it looks like we have one last question, which I think we might be able to squeeze in with our last couple minutes. So it's saying since the model operates off of available data, which changes, can the current databases be listed and can the pages display a current date?
Yes, so we do that for the infestation status updates. So you'll see a timestamp on that on the upper right corner, and that should be every tool that you visit there. When we change the networks, because we have not done that yet, we'll need to figure out how we communicate that. But yes, I think transparency in that is very important. And also thinking of an archiving system for folks. Other than when you run your intervention impact and that is kept, an ability to go back and see previous model outputs. We can connect with folks at Epi Interactive and pull that data, but if you don't archive your own outputs, We really don't have a way to pull that up easily right now, but that will be helpful once we transition to new networks as well.
Perfect. That timing could not have been better. So I'm going to take over screen share one more time and share our final slide. So thank you so much, Amy, for joining us today and sharing all of your information about AIS Explorer and all the new exciting updates to it. A couple of notes for those of you still on the line. We have been recording and you can watch for this to go onto our YouTube channel. There's a link showing on the screen to get to it if you want to see all of our past webinars. And then this one, once it posts in about a week or two, that's at z.umn.edu/AISTube. And we'll try to send an email out to everyone who registered as well once that's ready. You're also going to get a link to our survey, and we'd really appreciate it if you take some time to fill that out and give us some feedback on this webinar and our webinar series in general. I do have Amy's email showing. I know she mentioned that you can reach out to her as well as a few of the other members of the team. So I'm sorry, Amy, it's just you that's going to get all the emails because I don't have the other people's email addresses on the screen. But
Okay.
if you have more questions for Amy, or we're hoping to take her up on that offer for some one-on-one instruction, you can reach out to her there. And if you have questions for us at the AIS Detectors program about the webinar series in general, you can reach us at aisdetectors@umn.edu. And so now we've hit 2 o'clock, 2:01 even. So Amy, thank you again, and thanks to everyone who joined us today. We'll hope to see you at our next webinar in May, where we're going to be talking about Phragmites management.
Thank you.